All right, let's cut the crap and dive right into this shit ton of info you've dumped on us.
Aha.
It's all about the King's Christmas message.
Yeah.
You know, that yearly spiel from the British monarch.
Right.
You might think, who gives a shit about some stuffy royal speech? But hold on.
Yeah.
This shit's way more interesting than you think.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got articles, historical records, even some gossipy royal biographies enough to make your head spin.
Yeah. It's a wild history for sure. We're going all the way back to 1932 with King George V.
Really? The dude who supposedly hated radio?
Yeah.
That's some next-level hypocrisy that made him change his tune.
Well, the BBC's top dog, John Reith, this guy had been hounding him for years.
Oh, really?
To do a Christmas broadcast, George V thought radio was for the plebes, just pure entertainment, not fit for a king.
Right.
But there were a couple of key things that tipped the scales.
Like what?
First, his wife, Queen Mary, was apparently all about embracing the new tech.
Oh, so she was like, get with the times, old man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She probably gave him an earful about it.
Classic nagging wife scenario. Can't blame the guy for caving.
And then there was the Prime Minister, Ramsay MacDonald,
Right.
a smooth talker who likely saw the potential of radio for propaganda.
Propaganda, always gotta love that.
He probably twisted the king's arm a bit too. So in 1932,
Yeah.
the first royal Christmas message hits the airwaves.
Wow.
And get this, it was scripted by Rudyard freaking Kipling.
Kipling, the Jungle Book guy?
Yeah.
Some highbrow shit right there. Yeah, imagine trusting a children's book author with a royal address.
Well, it wasn't exactly light reading. Kipling's message was all about the empire unity and the king's role as this father figure to millions. Pretty heavy stuff.
A father figure to millions.
And get this, they had to build a makeshift studio at Sandringham House because the king refused to travel.
Typical royal, too good to step foot in a BBC studio.
Haha, pretty much.
But did anyone actually give a damn about this broadcast?
Oh, hell yeah. By 1934, millions were tuning in from all corners of the empire.
Really millions?
They even had this random shepherd dude, Walton Handy, introducing the king's speech.
Wait, so they were throwing regular folks into the mix with the king? That's some fucked up PR strategy. Imagine some sheep herder trying to set the mood for a royal address.
Oh, it was a different time, man. They were trying to create this image of the empire as one big happy family united by the king's voice.
One big happy family, pure bullshit. But did this whole Christmas message thing continue after George V kicked the bucket?
It did, but not without some drama. His son, Edward VIII, was supposed to take over.
Oh, yeah.
But we all know how that turned out.
Edward VIII, the playboy who threw away the crown for some American divorcee.
Exactly what a clusterfuck.
What a clusterfuck.
His abdication threw the whole monarchy into chaos, but luckily his brother, George VI, stepped up to the plate and kept the Christmas message tradition alive.
George VI, the King's Speech guy, right?
Yeah.
The one who had a stammer talk about pressure delivering a speech to millions when you can barely get the words out.
Oh, it was a huge challenge, especially with World War II looming.
Right.
His 1939 message is legendary.
Yeah.
He quoted this poem, God knows, and basically said, "We're marching into darkness, but we're holding on to God's hand." Chills, man.
Chills. So when did this whole thing jump from radio to TV? Did the Queen embrace the boob tube right away?
Not quite. She took over in 52 after her father died.
Right.
And her first Christmas message was still a radio-only gig.
Wow.
Broadcast from Sandringham as usual, sticking to tradition, even though TV was becoming the next big thing.
Old habits die hard, especially for those royals. But
Yeah.
when did she finally give in to the allure of the telly?
5 years later, in 1957, bam, the first televised Christmas message. The Queen was beamed right into people's living rooms. Imagine the frenzy, everyone huddled around their tiny black and white sets,
Oh, yeah.
eager to catch a glimpse of the monarch in their own homes.
Talk about a game changer. But hold on. There were years when she skipped the broadcast, right? What was up with that?
Yep, in 59 and 63, she was knocked up, and apparently pregnant queens weren't considered telegenic back then.
So they were hiding the royal baby bump. That's hilarious.
And then in 69, there was that royal family documentary that caused a shitstorm.
I vaguely remember that.
It was supposed to humanize the royals, show them as this normal, relatable family, but it backfired spectacularly. People felt like it was too intrusive, like the mystique of the monarchy was shattered.
Oversharing before social media even existed.
Yeah.
Imagine the outrage if that happened today. Twitter would explode.
Yeah, totally. The Queen actually issued a written message that year instead of a broadcast, probably to try to calm the shitstorm.
Right.
They realized they had overplayed their hand and needed to dial back the royal exposure.
Smart move. Got to keep them wanting more. But let's get to the juicy stuff. Did the Queen actually write this thing herself, or was it some PR hack churning out those heartwarming platitudes.
She was the mastermind, no doubt.
Right.
She picked the themes, wrote most of it sometimes, with Prince Philip throwing in his 2 cents.
What a power couple. Imagine those writing sessions, probably more tense than a cabinet meeting.
Yeah.
But didn't she eventually let other broadcasters in on the action?
Yeah, that happened in 97.
Okay.
The BBC had a monopoly on the broadcast for decades, but after they aired that bombshell Diana interview,
Right.
the Queen was pissed.
Diana's revenge served cold. Who could blame her?
So ITN got a chance to broadcast the message, and then in 2011, Sky News joined the party.
Sharing the royal spotlight, spreading the love, or maybe just trying to avoid further pissing off the Queen.
Haha, probably a bit of both. And here's the kicker. They even did a 3D broadcast in 2012.
Get out 3D glasses and the Queen's speech. That's a combo. Never thought I'd see what's next. Virtual reality Christmas messages.
Who knows what the future holds, but here's the thing about King Charles.
Yeah.
The current monarch, rumor has it that he writes his own speeches, no staff interference whatsoever.
So he's going full rogue. That's some ballsy shit.
Yeah.
Imagine the pressure knowing that millions are hanging on your every word.
It makes you wonder what kind of message he'll drop next. Will it be all about the environment?
Maybe.
Social justice?
Maybe he'll finally address those damn anti-immigrant riots. Things are getting heated out there.
Whatever he says, you can bet it'll make headlines. He's not afraid to speak his mind, even if it ruffles some feathers.
All right, so we've covered the history, the tech, the behind-the-scenes drama, but what about the actual messages? Did they change over time?
Absolutely. George V's early broadcasts were all about peace and unity, trying to hold the empire together. Then George VI had to deal with the war, so his messages were about resilience and hope,
Right.
rallying the troops and keeping spirits up.
And the Queen, what was her jam?
Her messages were all about service duty family.
Okay.
She had this knack for connecting with people, making them feel like she understood their struggles. Even if she was living in a palace, she was a pro at projecting this image of stability and continuity, especially during times of massive social and political change.
Yeah. She was the queen of keeping calm and carrying on. But let's be real, there had to be some juicy stuff buried in those speeches, right? Some royal gossip, some shade thrown at the politicians, spill the beans.
You'd be surprised the Queen was always careful to stay neutral, avoid any political controversies.
Oh, come on.
But there were definitely some hints about her personal life, especially in her later broadcast when she started to reflect on her long reign and the lessons she had learned.
Okay, so give us the highlights. What were some of the key themes that popped up over the years?
Well, in 1957, her first televised message, she talked about the importance of holding on to values in a rapidly changing world.
Right.
That was a big deal at the time with all the post-war upheaval and the rise of youth culture. She was basically saying, hey, even though things are changing fast, we need to remember who we are and what we stand for.
Makes sense. The world was going through some crazy shit back then.
Mm-hmm.
The old order was crumbling and people were looking for something to hold on to.
And then in 1975, she acknowledged the economic struggles that people were facing, record inflation, unemployment.
Right.
It was a tough time. She didn't offer any easy solutions.
Of course not.
But she acknowledged the pain and called for unity and resilience. It was a way of saying, hey, we're all in this together. Let's not lose hope.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? We're going through some similar shit today. Inflation's through the roof, and people are struggling to make ends meet.
History repeats itself, I guess, but the Queen always had this way of finding hope. Even in the darkest times, it was like she was this reassuring presence, this grandmother figure who had seen it all and knew we'd get through it.
All right, let's fast forward to more recent times. What about King Charles's first Christmas message? Did he live up to the hype?
His 2022 message was pretty powerful. He paid tribute to his mother, obviously, but he also talked about the cost of living crisis, the struggles that ordinary people were facing. It was a clear attempt to show that he was in touch with the common folk,
Right.
that he understood their pain.
So he's trying to shake off that image of being an out-of-touch elitist.
Definitely. He even praised all the volunteers and charity workers who are helping people out. It was a pretty clear message. We're all in this together. Let's support each other.
Sounds like a classic PR move, but hey, if it gets people to donate to food banks, I'm not complaining.
And then in his 2023 message, he went full-on environmentalist, talked about protecting the planet for future generations, even had a living Christmas tree as his backdrop.
Trying to appeal to the Gen Z crowd, huh? Greta Thunberg would be proud.
Haha. Well, it's an important issue no matter your age. He's been banging on about climate change for decades, so it's no surprise that he's making it a central theme of his reign.
True that, but what about this year? Any spoilers on what Charlie's going to preach about?
It's anyone's guess, but considering he had cancer and those riots happened.
Let's just say his speechwriters probably have their work cut out for them. Shit's going to be interesting.
No doubt about that.
Okay, before we go any further, let's hit pause for a sec. Grab a drink, take a piss, whatever you need to do. We'll be back in a jiffy to dive into some of the more controversial Christmas messages.
Buckle up, Buttercup. It's about to get wild.
Uh-huh. All right. All right, we were talking about controversial Christmas messages. Let's be real. These royal speeches aren't exactly known for stirring up shit.
Right.
But there have been a few eyebrow-raisers over the years. All right, spill the tea. Which one's got people's panties in a twist?
Well, back in 1956, the Queen got some flack for refusing to have the broadcast. Televised people thought she was being a stubborn old biddy, clinging to the radio like it was some sacred relic. Plus, some critics felt like the message itself was too preachy
Uh-huh.
and painted this rosy picture of the Commonwealth that was totally out of touch with reality.
Typical royal bullshit, ignoring the problems and pretending everything's hunky-dory.
Then there was 1969, the year of that disastrous royal family documentary. The Queen decided to skip the broadcast altogether, which some saw as a snub, like she didn't give a damn about connecting with the people after that PR nightmare.
Maybe she was just pissed off about the whole thing and needed a break from the public eye. Can't blame her.
And remember that time in 1992 when The Sun leaked her speech before it even aired?
Oh, yeah.
That was a major fuck-up talk about a royal screw-up.
Someone probably got fired for that, or maybe beheaded. Who knows how those royals handle their internal affairs?
But hey, at least it wasn't a sex tape, right? The royals have had enough of those scandals. Okay, what about more recent times did Charlie Boy stir up any shit?
Yeah. Has Charles gone full rebel on us?
His 2023 message definitely raised some eyebrows. He went heavy on the whole interfaith harmony thing, emphasizing shared values between different religions. Some people saw it as a veiled criticism of the hard right, especially with all the anti-immigrant rhetoric and those ugly riots.
So he's not afraid to get a little political good for him? Someone needs to call out those bigoted assholes.
He's definitely not shying away from controversial topics, and his 2024 message, the one he delivered from that former hospital chapel, was pretty heavy too.
Yeah, that was a weird choice of venue. What was he thinking, trying to look all holy and shit?
Maybe he wanted to send a message of healing and hope, considering he and Kate both battled cancer this year.
Right.
Plus, it tied in nicely with his praise for healthcare workers who've been through hell and back these past few years.
Fair enough, but let's be real. The real controversy was him bringing up those riots that took some balls, not your typical Christmas message material.
He didn't sugarcoat the mess, talking about repairing trust, rebuilding communities. It was a powerful statement, even if it pissed off some of the right-wing nut jobs.
Definitely a risky move, but it probably earned him some respect. He's not just some out-of-touch monarch hiding in his ivory tower. He's showing that he's engaged, that he actually gives a damn about what's happening in the real world.
Exactly. He's trying to position himself as a leader who understands the challenges people are facing. Okay, enough about the controversies. Let's talk themes. What are some of the recurring topics that keep popping up in these Christmas messages over the years?
Yeah. Besides the usual platitudes about peace on earth and goodwill towards men.
Well, peace and unity have always been biggies, especially during times of war or global unrest. The monarch is trying to project this image of stability, this sense that even when the world's going to shit, there's still this unifying figurehead, this symbol of continuity.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. What else?
Service and duty the royals are all about, that they're constantly reminding us to help others, to give back to our communities, to be good little citizens. It's all part of maintaining the social order, keeping the plebs in line.
Sounds a bit preachy, but hey, I guess it's a good message, especially these days when everyone's so self-absorbed and disconnected.
And then there's family. That's a constant theme, especially for the Queen. She always emphasized the importance of strong family bonds, of supporting each other through thick and thin.
Makes sense, considering she's the head of the most dysfunctional family in the world. Talk about irony.
Touché, but you have to admit, she did a pretty good job of keeping her own brood in line, at least in public.
Yeah, she was the queen of keeping up appearances. But what about other theme? Do they ever touch on anything a bit more, relevant to the real world?
There's also this theme of hope and resilience. It's something that has come up time and time again, especially during challenging times, wars, economic crises, social upheavals. The monarch is always there to remind us that we've been through tough times before and we'll get through them again.
Hope is a powerful drug, gives people something to cling to when shit hits the fan.
And let's not forget about the Commonwealth. That's been a major focus, especially in recent years, as the royals try to grapple with their legacy of colonialism and carve out a new role for themselves on the global stage.
Right.
They're trying to rebrand the Commonwealth as this progressive force for good, this symbol of diversity and cooperation.
Yeah, right. Like, the Commonwealth is some kind of utopian paradise, more like a relic of the empire. If you ask me, a bunch of former colonies still clinging to the apron strings of the motherland.
It's definitely a complex issue, but the royals are trying to use their platform to promote dialogue, understanding, cooperation between these disparate nations. Whether they're actually making a difference is debatable.
It sounds like a lot of diplomatic bullshit, but hey, I'm
Yeah.
sure they mean. Well, all right, let's wrap up this section. What's the big takeaway from all this royal rambling? Why should people give a damn about the king's Christmas message?
It's more than just a speech. It's a reflection of who we are as a society, where we've been, and where we're going. It's a window into the monarchy's evolution, how they've adapted to changing times and tried to stay relevant in a world that's rapidly leaving them behind.
Deep shit, man. You should be a poet or something. But seriously, is there any lasting impact from these broadcasts, or is it just a bunch of hot air that fades away as soon as the Queen's done speaking?
It's hard to say for sure, but they definitely spark conversations, get people thinking about important issues, even if it's just for a fleeting moment.
Okay, so maybe they're not entirely useless, but let's be honest. Most people probably just tune in for the Queen's outfits or to see if Charles has had another Botox injection.
Haha, you're probably right. But hey, if a little bit of royal spectacle gets people to pay attention to the message even for a few minutes, I guess that's a win.
Right. Enough about those blue bloods. Let's move on to something a little more down to earth. Next up, we're diving into the world of conspiracy theories. Get ready to have your mind blown, because this shit's about to get weird. All right, so we've dissected the King's Christmas message, its history, the controversies, all that jazz.
Right.
But here's something that's been bugging me. Is this whole thing just a British thing? Or do other countries get in on the royal rambling action?
It's funny you should ask. That turns out those Brits weren't the first to jump on the Christmas broadcast bandwagon.
Really?
Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands actually beat them to it by a year. She gave her first Christmas message way back in 1931, beaming it all the way to the Dutch East Indies and those other far-flung corners of their empire.
Yeah, those duchies were ahead of the game. But did this whole royal address thing catch on elsewhere? Was it like a trend that swept across the monarchies of Europe?
It totally did. Like, everyone wanted a piece of the action.
Huh.
The Pope started doing his own Christmas message.
Oh, wow.
And then other European monarchs followed suit. The King of Sweden, the King of the Belgians, even the frickin' Grand Duke of Luxembourg. They all wanted to get in on the act.
It's like a popularity contest for monarchs. Look at me. I can talk to my subjects through the magic of radio, who can sound the most profound, the most compassionate, the most in touch with their people.
And it wasn't just monarchs, presidents got in on the game too.
Really?
The German president, the Spanish king, they all have their own Christmas addresses, trying to connect with the masses and project an image of leadership and wisdom.
So it's a global phenomenon. Now every world leader wants to give their 2 cents at Christmas, whether anyone's listening or not.
Pretty much, some countries have even shifted to New Year's messages. It's like a way for leaders to wrap up the year,
Right.
reflect on what happened, pat themselves on the back for their accomplishments, and lay out their grand vision for the future.
Right.
A lot of promises, a lot of platitudes, and a whole lot of hot air.
Sounds like a whole lot of political posturing to me, but hey, at least it gives us something to talk about, besides the weather and our crazy relatives during the holiday season. So spill the beans. Which countries have the most interesting New Year's messages? Are there any hidden gems out there?
Well, the Canadians and Kiwis both have governors general who give New Year's addresses.
Okay.
And then there are the Scandinavian kings, Denmark, Norway, even Thailand. They all have their own traditions, their own ways of connecting with some people during this time of year.
Those Nordic countries are always doing their own thing. What about those big players like China and Russia? Do they get in on the action?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear Putin's New Year's message. Probably a lot of saber rattling and threats against the West.
You bet they do. The Chinese and Russian presidents both have New Year's messages. And don't forget about the French, the Italians, the Filipinos. They all have their own ways of marking the occasion with a message from their leaders.
It's like a worldwide chorus of political promises and platitudes. Makes you wonder if anyone actually listens to all this stuff, or if it's just background noise while everyone's stuffing their faces with turkey and opening presents.
Well, it's definitely a way for leaders to try to connect with their people, even if it's just for a few minutes.
Okay.
To project an image of strength, compassion, whatever message they're trying to sell that year, whether anyone actually buys it, is another story.
Yeah, right? Like, anyone actually believes those political speeches? They're all full of shit, just trying to spin the narrative and make themselves look good.
Well, some messages are more genuine than others, but hey, at least it's an attempt at communication, a way for leaders to acknowledge their people, even if it's just a symbolic gesture.
True. So what about the good old U.S. of A. Does the president get in on the Christmas message game, or are they too busy bombing other countries to worry about spreading holiday cheer?
They do.
Really?
It's usually part of the president's weekly address, which is a bit less formal than those royal broadcasts, and sometimes they'll even give a special message to the troops,
Oh, okay.
thanking them for their service and wishing them a Merry Christmas from afar.
So it's like a shout out to the soldiers fighting those endless wars.
Yeah.
A little reminder that someone back home is thinking of them, even if they don't agree with the whole damn war in the first place.
Yeah, a way to boost morale, I guess, to remind those soldiers that they're fighting for a noble cause, even if it doesn't always feel that way on the ground. But back in the 80s, things got really interesting. Reagan and Gorbachev actually started exchanging televised New Year's messages.
Why?
Can you imagine that two superpowers locked in a nuclear standoff trying to outdo each other with messages of peace and goodwill?
Talk about a Cold War thaw. Those two must have had some epic speeches trying to sound tough and conciliatory. At the same time, it's like a political tightrope walk.
It was a pretty big deal at the time, a symbol of hope and cooperation, even though the two countries were still at odds on pretty much everything else. It showed that even in the midst of a global rivalry, there was still this desire for dialogue, for finding common ground.
Makes you wonder what kind of messages Putin would be sending out these days. Probably some scary shit about nuclear warheads and crushing the West. Not exactly the warm and fuzzy holiday vibes we're used to.
Let's not go there. It's supposed to be the season of peace and goodwill after all, but hey,
Yeah.
maybe this whole Christmas and New Year's message tradition isn't such a bad thing after all. It's a chance for leaders to step back from the political bullshit, at least for a moment, and try to connect with people on a human level.
Right.
To offer some words of hope, inspiration, or at least a fleeting sense of unity.
Sounds a bit idealistic, but I'll give you that even the most cynical bastards need a little bit of hope and goodwill at Christmas. It's a time for reflection, for gratitude, for acknowledging that we're all in this together, whether we like it or not.
Exactly. So there you have it. The King's Christmas message isn't just some quirky British tradition. It's part of a global phenomenon, a way for leaders to connect with their people and maybe inspire a little bit of hope for the future, even if it's all just a carefully crafted performance. There's still something compelling about this shared ritual, this attempt to find meaning and connection during a time of year that can be both joyous and challenging.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of royal Christmas messages and their global counterparts. Who knew those stuffy speeches could be so damn fascinating? We've covered everything from the early days of radio to Putin's potential nuclear threats. It's been a wild ride full of history, politics, and a healthy dose of cynicism.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
And for you listening, thanks for joining us on this journey. Remember, knowledge is power, even if it comes from the mouths of monarchs. And politicians, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay skeptical. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.